Hello everybody, you join me on a beautiful but extraordinarily warm British summer's eve for another instalment in this week's little series looking at more affordable vehicles, because I do believe very firmly it's good to keep my feet firmly on the ground amongst this sea of very lovely and exotic machinery, and also because, well, cheap cars are ruddy good fun. And today I'm driving something that I think is actually, nowadays, rather special. BMW is a brand that is actually reasonably close to my heart. Nearly a third of all of the cars that I have ever owned have been BMWs. For many people, they'll always be the ultimate driving machine. But the sad thing is, I can't really think of a single car that they currently make that I'd actually attach that tag to. And then when I really start to think about it, you have to go back quite some time in order to find a car that I think is truly deserving of the title. And today we're driving what could be one of the last few relatively cheap cars you can get that would earn that badge. So this car's going to get a proper introduction. If you're just interested in watching the driving, skip to this time in the video. But this is Graham's beautiful Boston Green Metallic 1998 BMW 328i Sport. Now, he is no stranger to the brand, or indeed to E36 Sports. He had one previous to this and then decided that he wanted another. But getting these cars these days isn't that easy. They're not crazy money, they're a lot more than they used to be, but the problem is so few are remaining that are in reasonably good and usable condition, and certainly even fewer at sensible prices. He got very lucky with this car, the main reason being that it's got nearly 180,000 miles on the clock. But other than a few bits of cosmetic work that need doing, it's actually a heck of a car. And the original owner certainly loved it because he spent a lot of money speccing it up. In fact, he managed to take the just over £28,000 list price of one of these cars up to about 37 grand. In fact, the original bill of sale is one of the documents with this car, and it lists this car's price at 37,340 quid. How did he get there? Well, that Boston green paint, 445 quid. This light grey piped Napa leather, £1,275. The electric rear pop-out quarter lights, which I love, or the quarter windows anyway, they're 245 quid. And I had those on my E46. They're fantastic, especially when you combine them with the sunroof, which was something he had to have. That's £810 new. Cruise control, very fancy for 1998, £415. The polished burr walnut wood interior, very classy, very nice, even though it's sort of a typical BMW thing. They seem to have certain things are available in whatever colour you want, certain things are available only in one colour. So you have two shades of grey, a black and wood here, all a bit confused, but it works well. That's £730 for the wood. A tracker for a 3 Series? I know, but it's the 90s. Stuff did get nicked. £268. The Luxe pack, which included some extended leather, which is very nice indeed, does lift the interior, dual climate, and a trip computer and stuff, which is very fun to use, 662 quid. CD changer that still works, £400. Floor mats, £100. Luggage mat, £60. The AC Schnitzer short shift gear knob and kit, £643. Now that's removed because Graham didn't like the feel of it, and all the bushings and all the linkages, all that were completely shot, so he had the whole thing redone back to factory standard. AC Schnitzer pedal set is mostly there, but the footrest he took off because it just got in the way of his shoes, and I can understand that entirely. £233. Cigar lighter in the boot, so 12 volt in the boot, £100. The M-Tech M3 mirrors, which shouldn't probably have come with this car, but they did. They were £500. And the M-Tech 2 rear wing at the back, which was used on the M3 GTs apparently, that's original. That came with this car. Very aggressive looking thing, actually. Very nice. They were £992 back in the day, and you probably pay a lot more than that nowadays for one of them, because I think they're one of those pieces that everyone wants and you just can't get them. And it also has the Avis suspension pack, which came with Bilstein Sportline shocks, stiffer springs and eccentric bushes on the front control arms. The only real modifications are chrome tips for the exhaust, a bit of a tinted top screen, it's got a badge delete, and it's got tinted, I think, front indicators, and a K&N air filter. Everything else has just been maintained or returned to standard where it wasn't. It's in remarkably good condition. It's worn its years very, very well. And I have to say, the E36 is a car I never really liked the look of, but they are growing on me. And I'm very keen to drive this car because a few weeks ago, I got to drive a very modified, track-focused E36 Estate. And that car shocked me because it was absolutely sublime. This one is almost completely standard, or certainly in any way that, affects driving, it's totally standard. It had a remap, but for purposes of smoothness. No tangible power gains or anything like that I claim for this car. And if you are interested in the numbers, here they are. And you can see from that power figure, which isn't even 200 horsepower, and the weight figure, which isn't especially light, it's not going to be a quick car, but it's very well presented. You just don't see these very often. And you are reminded when you sit in this thing that this was once upon a time really premium vehicle. You have to remember in the 90s, this is when I guess things changed a little bit, when people did start, doing finance deals on cars, when company car stuff started to die out towards the end of the decade. And so Cavaliers, Mondeos and things like that suddenly started vanishing, and then the sort of 3 Series, the C-Class, that kind of all started up. But just before we hit the road, I do want to share with you a couple of gifts Graham very, very kindly gave to me, because I think they'll be of interest to you all as well. This is Evo magazine, one of the best driving magazines or car magazines that we've had in Great Britain for a very, very long time. And this particular issue, I've actually been trying to track down for a long time, because this is a special issue that they did celebrating 10 years of the best drivers' cars. And the car that won was a Ferrari 550. I've actually been trying to track down a copy of this magazine, but it hasn't gone very well. The other gift, I'll admit, when I saw this in the bag, I had a man moment. There was emotions. Emotions tried to escape from me. He has given me a copy of the greatest videotape in the world. Jeremy Clarkson's Unleashed on Cars from 1996. Now, this videotape is extremely important, not just for me personally, because I loved it to death as a child, but also because it was actually heavily influential in what Top Gear then later became. If you watch this, if you knew what Top Gear was like when this came out, you'll see then the sort of seeds of what Top Gear turned into. I watched this a lot as a kid. I also returned to it recently, and I've sort of given quite a few hints and nods to this tape and the others that he produced as well, particularly the one after this, which was Apocalypse Clarkson. And this is a really, really genuinely nice gift. I'm made up about it, and it means so much to me, like genuinely, because when I was watching this as a kid, I was watching him driving this 355 thinking, wow, what must it be like to drive a Ferrari? That must be amazing. That must be a brilliant job to have. And then this very morning, I've just flown back from Italy, where I was invited to go and drive the latest Roma by Ferrari. That's not something I imagined myself being able to do. And I know, for a lot of guys out there, doing all this press stuff is like, everyone's on a jolly. And I know a lot of people that don't do YouTube think it's just, a daily occurrence. Like, it's just a normal, ordinary thing getting invited on a Ferrari press do. Nah, for me, it's big. For me, it means an unthinkable amount. And I've never tried to get in contact with him, but I have enough people following me now that somebody must know a way of reliably getting in touch with Jeremy, because I would love to have him sign this. This copy actually I think now means more to me probably than my original copy did, as this being a gift from a subscriber. And the original copy I think was bundled up and sent to a charity shop many, many moons ago. I'm not going to try and pretend that this is the original copy. It's not, but it means so much more to me for that. Anyway, if someone can put me in touch with him, get this signed, I want to frame it. It'll mean a lot. Anyway, let's talk more about the car, shall we? But we're going to hit the road, because as you can probably tell, I'm getting quite warm in here with all the AC turned off. There are a few things that you notice almost immediately once jumping into this car, particularly if you're getting out of something fairly modern. Firstly, and mercifully, the aircon actually works brilliantly. Really cold, very effective. I'm so grateful for that. And I will be opening the sunroof in a little bit, but not just yet. Secondly, visibility is superb. I mean, absolutely fantastic. Now, all the pillars in here are as thin as a gnat's crotchet, and it means that you can see everything. I mean, I was aghast when I looked over there to check my rear three quarters, do my lifesaver earlier, and it's just like looking out of a bedroom window. You just got a brilliant panoramic view of everything. Nobody driving one of these cars should ever be able to say, I didn't see them coming. Thirdly, it's actually a very nice, civilized and refined car. Despite the fact that it is fitted with sporty suspension, it's really rather comfortable and plush. Now, unfortunately, the leather is creaking quite a bit, although that would be, I think, fairly easy to solve, and it's probably me being in it that isn't helping. However, this does genuinely feel like a somewhat more upmarket car than many of its contemporaries, especially those from, say, Ford and Vauxhall. I've been in a lot of their produce, certainly in period, and they were not nice places to be even back then. I have actually owned an E36, but it was a track car that I don't talk about too often because it was a terrible idea, I hardly ever drove it, and it just cost me a packet to go nowhere in. The cars I'm more fond of are my E46s, more specifically my 330, much less so my M3. And the dials in here do seem pretty much bang on an E46. The rest of the interior, not so much. I love the very heavily driver-focused setup we've got here. It's even more extreme, I think, than the 46. And all the controls fall nicely to hand. The pedals are surprisingly close together. I'm using my comfy shoes at the moment, not my driving ones, and I had to be very careful, not just with the throttle and brake, but also with the clutch pedal too. There isn't very much room for your foot to rest over there, and I can see why he would have got rid of the little AC schnitzer rest, because it certainly would have got in the way of my feet. The exhaust on this car, as with much of the rest of it, is totally standard, and that means you just get this sort of faint noise coming through. Feels like you'd almost expect from a 5 or a 7 series. You know, it's understated, it's classy. You know that there's a reasonable power plant up there, but it's not shouting about it. And that is one of the all-time great engines up there. Have no doubt about that whatsoever. It's fantastic. Now, there are ways to easily extract a bit more power out of them. Famously, what you do is you take the manifold from a 325i, and you can do a few bits as well, throttle bodies, injectors, and that sort of stuff, and you can quite easily free up a bit more power. I believe it was a combination of wanting to keep the models distinct and also a German insurance regulation, or so I'm told, that kept this pegged back to about 193 horses or so. The later E36 330 jumped up to about 230 horsepower, which is quite a leap, really. It's nearly another 40 horsepower, but also a bigger, heavier car again. I love the feel of this steering wheel. It's just about the right size for this kind of car. It's beautifully thin, and of course there is nothing on it whatsoever. Throttle pedal is perfectly responsive, really quite nice, and the brakes are really easy to modulate. This isn't a particularly difficult car to drive at normal speeds, and of course it shouldn't be. This is what it is designed to do, just drive around, and its owner has done big miles in this. He doesn't cherish it or treat it like some sort of garage queen. Oh no, he does a lot of big trips down to the southwest coast of England in this car, and he absolutely adores it, and rightly so. But you'll want to know if it can still excite. Let's find out, shall we? I've prepared an old school test. This is a road I used to use many, many years ago when I owned my E46. Let's see if the 36 has got some magic left in her. It's a joy, this car, it really is. Now, it actually seems to almost firm up as you go a little bit harder, but it rides these roads so well, and honestly, these roads are a pretty stern test of any car. Now, all of the controls are a little bit slower than you might be used to if you've driven some more modern performance machinery. And truthfully, if outright pace is the thing you're after, this is completely the wrong car. Even for the money, it's just not the thing to buy. An unmodified Fiesta ST would simply walk away from this thing in a straight line and probably run away from it in the bends. But that's not the point. The steering is a little slower than I'm used to, but I am used to cars with quite fast racks, if I'm being perfectly honest. However, it's pretty accurate. There's even a little bit of feedback coming through. Not much, mind, and that's probably in part due to the fairly chunky sidewalls on the tyres up front. But the chassis actually talks to you a surprising amount, so you do know what it's up to. It's kind of playful too, but you want to be wary because these cars, once they brake, they do tend to go quite quickly. So this is more a sort of car that I want to drive smoothly and cleanly. I'm not trying to provoke it. And in fairness, I have at low speeds tried a couple of times to see if the rear end wants to play, and on a day like today, there's just too much grip available. You do have a rudimentary form of traction control, or anti-slip control, I believe it is down here, ASC. I wouldn't bank on it doing much, to be honest. All these old systems are a bit lethal because they either will do stuff when you don't expect them to, or they'll do nothing when you really could use their help. So just pretend it's not there is my advice. The throttle pedal is brilliant. There's not a lot of power under that bonnet, but what it has, it gives you so readily and keenly, and you can modulate it with complete precision. Heel and toe, no trouble at all. Rev match, really easy. Oh, and it floats and it flies. You can place the car really nicely. It's super narrow, this thing, as well, compared to a modern 3 or 4 series. Brakes are fantastic. They remind me a little bit of Porsche ones, actually. You've got to really press that pedal to get the best from them. This car did actually previously have aftermarket discs and pads, but Graham wasn't happy with the response, so he went back to an OEM style setup, and I have to say, he made the right decision. I did drive the car quite a bit early for the drive-bys, and it got a little bit hot, so I think I found the limit of the brakes. I wouldn't do a track day with this setup, but for road driving, for enthusiastic driving, it's great. Similarly, this gearbox, 4th to 5th is not very good, but everything else is really nice. It's a fairly long throw because it is standard, and there's a reasonable degree of notchiness, but it's also fairly precise. Yeah, it's when you go 4th to 5th, it doesn't feel like there's the same sort of action required as, say, going from 4th to 1st would, the other direction. It's a bit odd, but otherwise, that's a minor criticism. It's 1st through 4th that you're really going to use when you're having a spirited bit of fun, especially on this kind of road. 5th is your cruising gear. Now, if you are thinking of running one of these cars as a daily or regular car, they're not too bad, actually. Parts are still reasonably easy to get, and of course most of your maintenance items are pretty damn cheap as well. The big thing with cars like this is, of course, going to be rust and the ravages of time, really. The fact I would expect a lot of the bushes and parts like that on these cars to be fairly worn by now. These cars rarely had the easiest of lives, certainly when they were next to no money to buy. So do check one over thoroughly if you are thinking of purchasing, even if it's coming from somewhere allegedly reputable. It's on this kind of road where the modern BMWs would just be absolutely lost. I mean, there just isn't anything in the BM range now that excites me. Even something like an M5 or an M8, maybe, but they're gargantuan. I'd be terrified in one of those on this road. They're just not fun. This thing is great. I don't even have to bother the speed limit to enjoy myself. You get into a rhythm with this car really easily. Now, I think next on Graham's list needs to be the clutch or flywheel, or possibly both, because when you're going to pull away, you can feel a bit of a judder, so I think that is probably on its way out. They're not especially expensive, and they do last a very long time indeed, so again, not really something to worry about. Fuel economy is, well, it's good or bad depending on your perspective. I tend to think it is good these days because really any fuel economy figure starting with a 2 that isn't 2, I think is pretty decent. You'd get, I would say, as a lifetime average, something like the high 20s to the gallon if you're just using this car in sort of normal circumstances. On a run, obviously, it can be a little bit thirstier. But I always find with these old naturally aspirated engines, they tend to get reasonably close to their quoted figures. It was only really the later turbocharged engines that started giving you very unrealistic expectations of what economy you could get out of them. And it's when you start to press on that the differences between this standard car and the modified one that I drove do become apparent. You see, in that track-focused wagon, it would do precisely what you told it to. It was absolutely welded to the ground. Whereas this one, you have to adopt a very different technique. Because even this sporty suspension setup is still relatively softly sprung and damped by today's standards, you have to have a real two-way conversation with the car. It is a dance when you want to go fast. It's in trickier sections where the road is not even and you're trying to ask the car to do an awful lot. You have to be prepared for it to move around under you a little bit. But it's okay, it never does anything particularly unexpected. What it's doing is protecting you from the real harshness in the road. The cost is a little imprecision in the helm. Stuff like this, for example. You do the odd corrective maneuver, but the car will get you around happily and in great comfort and style. You have to just be wary of the fact that it isn't the stiffest thing in the world, which is, I think, only a good thing. And you're always going to be conscious of how the weight is transferring around and moving. And then you realise that what you're doing is driving. And you are having an awful lot of fun in the process. You're not going especially quickly, but you're really involved, and you realise that on your favourite twisty country back lane, this is the road I used to drive many moons ago when I only had a moped licence. And I did it because it was so tight and narrow that 30 mile an hour didn't seem I was getting in people's way that much. And that means that you can really enjoy this car. You've got to work through the gearbox. It's not especially torquey, neither is it really that powerful, but you can use all the revs, you can use everything that it has. And then when you're done enjoying yourself, you realise that it has beautiful, wonderful aircon. It's got a sunroof, which is lovely, especially on a nice summer's eve like today. The radio and CD player even work, no DAB of course. The trip computer still works as well, as does the clock, and sadly the MPG readout, which I've been hammering a little bit. And you can see where you're going, you can park it easily, and then the obvious becomes apparent. This isn't just a better BMW than what is available now. It's a better car as well. I am a firm believer that the 1990s was pretty much the high watermark for cars, full stop. It brought us the Ferrari 355, it brought us the 550, it brought us both the 993 and 996 generation of 911. It brought us the McLaren F1. And if you want something a little more humdrum, it also brought us the BMW E36 and the 46. It brought us the Honda S2000. This is a car which is at once an excellent driver's car and also a fabulous daily. The two needn't be exclusive, nor does one have to have one's fillings shaken to pieces in the name of speed, because ultimately speed isn't actually, to me, that exciting anymore. Maybe I am just getting old, who can say? But what I can tell you is that this car is a hoot. I really like it. I want to say a big old thank you to Graham for lending it to me for a few hours. It's been a wonderful way to spend an evening. Thank you all for watching. Please like, comment below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you all for the next one. Bye bye.